Okay, we are ready to go.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask everybody to mute, please, real quick. Thank you. Welcome to the Creswell Planning Commission meeting. It is June 17th, 2021. It is 5:04 p.m. Let's see. Present planning commissioners are Jessica Landstra, Chair, Patrick Gehring, Vice Chair, David Christopher, Ed Gunderson, and Seth Clark. Absent is Susan Bennett and Tammy Sushuk. All right. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes of May 20th, 2021? All right. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
David makes a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Seth. All those in favor of approving the minutes of May 20th, 2021? Raise a hand, please. All right, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, on to the audience here. Thank you. And if we have any audience members, Maddie, I don't know if we have anyone out there right now. 0. Okay, well, no welcomes then. Let me know if we have anybody pop up. And commissioner comments. What do you guys have today? Comments, questions? Yeah, Seth.
Yeah, I have a comment. I just actually accepted a position with it's an entrepreneur in community, or EIC, with the nonprofit RAIN Oregon. Thank you, Maddie. I don't feel like this interferes with my role as a commissioner at all, but because I will be working with the city and wearing a entrepreneurial sort of hat, I just thought I'd disclose that to this group and put it in public record. So that's
Thank you, Seth. That's really exciting. That's awesome. I'm glad that you took that position. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm happy about it. When they approached me, it checked off a lot of boxes of things that I'm passionate about. Namely, I get to work with other entrepreneurs in Creswell specifically and kind of help them with some like one-on-one mentoring and identifying some ways in which they can solve problems that they might encounter. So that seems like a really cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Congratulations. All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I brought this up before, and I'm still puzzled about where the swale is going to be at the new 76 station and the car wash.
I think they're installing some storm drains. I don't think there's a swale.
In the original plan, though, there was a swale on the north side. But anyway, there's
some trees along the rear.
Yes, maybe I should come by and look at what we approved.
Sure, and I'd be happy, Commissioner, to send you a copy of the Public Works review, the stamped version, so you can see what their stormwater requirements and review were.
Okay, but stormwater and swale, I mean, they're all in one, or?
There are different approaches to stormwater, and some of those include being able to put stormwater into storm drains, the grates, or catch basins. And I think because they're 76 has historically been connected to the ODOT right-of-way catch basins, they still have the ability, just like the folks across the street, if I recall right, they still have the ability to put stormwater into that storm drain to the same amount that they had previously.
Probably with an oil separator or something?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Anything else? Any other comments? No? All righty. On to the next Item, new business. We have a public hearing tonight. All right. And I got my script, Maddie. Thank you very much. Okay. The Planning Commission will be making a recommendation on case number PA-2021-02, a request by the City of Creswell to amend to the Creswell Development Code. Okay. To relocate standards related to fencing in all use zones to the Creswell Municipal Code. The proposed change will streamline the standards applicable to fencing within city limits and assure consistency of review. Fencing standards for residential uses will generally remain the same. Updates are proposed for fencing standards applicable to commercial and industrial zones. Planning Commission's recommendation will determine next steps for the proposed legislative change, including a second required public hearing with the Creswell City Council. Testimony, arguments, and evidence presented must be directed toward the approval criteria or other criteria that the speaker believes applies to the decision. The failure of anyone to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and parties opportunity to respond will preclude appeal on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right, we'll be opening the hearing at 5:10. The public hearing on the plan amendment PA-2021-02 regarding fence standards is now open. Do any commissioners have an ex parte contact, actual or potential conflict of interest, or bias to declare? No. No. Okay. No for everybody. Maddie, would you please present the staff report?
Absolutely, Chair. I just had to get to my mute button. Thank you, Commissioners, for your attention tonight regarding what I would consider a housekeeping item. Tonight you are reviewing some material that we touched on at your last meeting, and I'll kind of cover some of the details of it. But the overall concept is that for many years, probably since we adopted the new development code in 2007, Creswell has had two fence standards, one that's located in the municipal code and one that is located in the Creswell Development Code. While this would seem fairly innocuous, unfortunately the two codes are not the same. And we are sometimes faced with questions when members of the public bring forward information from one or the other, and we have to kind of sort out how to review their fence permit. So as a result of a number of conversations with our code enforcement officer and others, staff made the recommendation and took action to revise the fence standards so that they are located in only one of our regulatory documents. And secondly, that those fence standards accurately reflect how the city regulates fences. For a little bit of review and update, fences have previously been regulated by Section 15.15 in the Creswell Municipal Code, as well as Section 2.3600, I believe, in the Creswell Development Code. So, in your packets this evening, you will see two different ordinances per the recommendation of our city attorney. One that removes information from the Creswell Development Code, and one that creates a new version of the Creswell Fence Code. So the sections that you'll see, I apologize because the ordinance numbers get assigned when the item comes up on the city council docket, so they aren't really differentiated in numbers at the moment. But you'll see amending the Creswell Development Code, and it has two attachments. First attachment is the staff report and findings of fact. Second attachment is the actual code language that's proposed to be changed, which is a number of red line or strike throughs. And the other ordinance is an ordinance that you'll find has quite a bit more content, and it highlights and spells out essentially what the new fence code will be in the municipal code. One of the advantages to isolating fence code in one of these two documents is that, one, there's consistency, and then two, if we have code violations related to fencing, those will be processed through code enforcement, and the process for code enforcement is fairly clear in the municipal code. In the development code, as members have alluded to with other projects that actually you brought up earlier in the night, those issues about enforcement of land uses can be quite complicated, and it's much more difficult for the city to take action to rectify those issues. So, as it were, I'll present a little bit more on the staff report and findings of the first ordinance with the two attachments, and then we can get into the discussion if there are comments or concerns about the second ordinance related to the new fence code. So, the first ordinance amending the development code, you will find that the staff report and findings are fairly brief. That was intentional, and it largely has to do with the fact that as a city, when we amend the comprehensive plan or make a plan amendment, which in this case is a code amendment or a legislative amendment, sometimes, especially with really small details like fencing and walls, these items don't have a lot of reference in the larger long-range comprehensive plan document. There's very little discussion, if any, of fencing in our comp plan. And that makes a lot of sense in many ways, because that document intends to set out a future vision for the community, 20 years of growth, and might send specific recommendations into, like reference a transportation plan or reference the housing needs analysis or something of this nature. But rarely does a document at that level get into the minutia of heights of certain standards. So you'll see that the findings are fairly brief. There aren't very many comprehensive plan requirements for fences, nor are there very many statewide land use planning goals to which this pertains. So this is just almost like a formality to exercise findings of fact that say, frankly, there aren't very many standards that apply to this request. What I would add of particular interest or note is the only reference I could think of from a long-range planning document is actually action that the downtown team recently took action on about a year and a half ago, which was to identify or call out civic buildings and their fencing standards in downtown commercial zones. So you hopefully will see that reflected in the following ordinance. But that was in response to discussion about tall, maybe unwelcoming fences in downtown areas that prevented people from feeling comfortable walking along streets that are designed and oriented to encourage folks to walk. Are there any questions about the first ordinance and its attachments? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to the municipal code ordinance. Now, the municipal code ordinance is quite a bit more robust, and you'll also have noted in your email that I sent out some new graphics that our planning specialist and our code enforcement officer collaborated on. These will be inserted into the ordinance that you see related to the municipal code in replacement of there are four figures on pages, 2, 3, around the definitions and clear vision standards. Those four graphics will be reduced to 2 graphics. And I'd be happy to pull those up for you if anyone was unable to view those in your email. But basically, we're trying to clarify older incarnations of the fence standards and many iterations of packets that have been produced by the city. The definition section, you'll notice, calls out fences, anything that's shorter than 4 feet, that's a wall that doesn't hold back material, that's not regulated by the building code, is sometimes called a landscaping wall. In this ordinance, you'll see the fence standard and landscaping wall standards interchangeable because neither are structural in nature. There is a call out for the structural specialty code, anything that retains the foundation of a building. I believe it's described as does not support, protect, or retain a regulated building. So if someone has a retaining wall that retains a greenhouse or a shed that is under 200 square feet, it is still considered a landscaping wall, as long as it is not adjacent to a public right-of-way. So there are some nuances there that many of our staff members are learning the ropes on. So this is good news. You'll see definitions related to some of the items that we would have contained in the development code, pertaining to property lot lines, which is the front, which is the side, etc. You'll see permits when they're required, general standards related to clear vision, and then finally, allowed materials, prohibited materials, a call out for Mr. Gunderson is that I do not believe that we removed, salvage materials not originally designed as structural components of fences. So my sense in understanding what are dangerous materials, I do not believe that sheet metal or materials that are produced for the use of display or function would be considered hazardous, including but not limited to sheet metal. I hope that gets to the idea that we spoke about at the last meeting, but I'd be happy to discuss that a bit more if needed. In terms of height and placement, the big changes are that, one, the city currently does not have a standard for commercial or industrial fencing, and this ordinance will create one. To that end, for commercial and industrial fencing, staff recommends that there be an ability to increase the height of fences for commercial and industrial uses, so long as, one, the applicant achieve or pull a building permit for them because they have a snow and wind load requirement. And then two, if they do choose to use any kind of barbed wire, I think we kept this in and it is subject to approval by this group. If they do use barbed wire, it may not be visible from the street. So if you wanted to put up barbed wire on the back side of a building against the railroad tracks, somewhere that's perhaps a little higher risk, that's okay, or at least that was the sort of middle ground that we struck after reflecting on your conversation last month. However, we do not want to see barbed wire used in any part of the front setback of a commercial building or industrial facility. So that was a hope, maybe that's a good compromise for us. And before I move on, this is where the downtown commercial fencing comment from the downtown plan is now part of the commercial and industrial zone section. Are there any questions about that or any comments on where that landed?
Sorry, I have a question. Not to point out specifics, but there is a chain link fence in downtown commercial that's existing already. That's grandfathered in because it's already there? Okay.
In fact, yeah, Commissioner Clark, I think we would we would not be in the. I don't think the city would be that interested in going after existing fencing, but if that fence needed to be substantially altered or improved, we would ask, at least around civic facilities, that chain link be modified to something a little bit nicer.
Okay, on the materials, allowed materials,
Mm-hmm.
We've specified a number of things, but one thing we've not specified is the use of plastics.
Mm.
And so would that indicate that if somebody wanted to put up a plastic fence, that they'd have to get a variance?
That's right, Manny. There's a lot of plastic fencing out there. Nice white picket and rail fences.
Good point. And then I guess we could get into the discussion of what is Trex anyway.
Now, for me, I'd be just as happy if we discouraged the plastic, because plastics are becoming quite an environmental problem. So, I mean, if you had to get a variance for it, I'm happy with that. But I just wanted to point out that we didn't specify that it is used and it is sold at the lumberyard.
To that end, would there be a good feeling about similar masonry or commercially produced fencing materials? So if there was a fencing material that was new that we didn't anticipate, it wouldn't necessarily be prohibited. It could be listed in the allowed materials as some kind of commercially produced material specific to fencing systems.
Yeah, if it had some kind of approval. It's like,
I mean, even the slats put in chain link to give you to decrease visibility, those are plastic.
Yeah.
So those are prohibited. Those aren't an acceptable product to use.
Interestingly enough, we require them.
Yeah, okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I thought that I understand the plastic fencing, but I think they actually have to have like 2x4s inside those rails to attach them to the posts.
No, just the post typically, and even now they do the posts all plastic, just like a piece of well casing or something like that. Some of the older styles had your post going over a 4x4, and they're not doing that anymore because the plastic is thicker and it doesn't warp and age. Their products have gotten better to where they don't have those kinds of problems anymore.
Now, AMA, American Architectural Materials Association, has developed standards for vinyl building products. And the thing is that if you have a product that's a vinyl product, for example, that's not made to a standard, it can deteriorate in a very short order, and you've got little particles of plastic all over the city. So there are issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, yeah. And I don't know how we word the approval. You wouldn't want to just say, well, it has to be AMA approved, because there are other bodies.
Good point.
Can of worms.
Indeed.
Could leave it in there, leave it out of there, so they have to get the variance and then have to, prove that it's durable.
Yeah, so maybe it would be a good thing to leave it as it is and make that kind of material be a variance, and then show that, yeah, it's been approved.
It might be a simple solution as some kind of wood or wood alternative. Where it says fences may be constructed of wood, the same way we say, or similar masonry. products because we probably assume that there are lots of variety of masonry products. So if we said wood or wood alternatives, I think most of the vinyl products or plastic products that are used as fencing are some kind of wood alternative, like a decking material, or I guess Trex was just the brand name that I'm familiar with.
All those different composites are making, those vendors are making fencing material to match their decking. And yes, it's a composite of plastic, supposedly recycled plastic and hardwood chips. The plant I looked at down outside of Reno for Trex was, yes, recycled plastic and oak wood chips back in the day.
Fascinating.
But the early development of the composite products had a lot of problems. I put down a small Trex deck to try it out in the early days, and it delaminated, disintegrated, like Ed was saying, with plastic and sawdust all over the place within a 5-year period. Hopefully they've solved that. Supposedly they have in their new generation of product, but there are those kinds of problems. They're not unheard of.
And of course, David, to your point, it's difficult for us as a city to regulate how a person's deck or fence rather would hold up. If it disintegrates, just like if cedar disintegrates because they didn't paint it or didn't treat it correctly and it rots out. I mean, that's an inevitability of materials. But for the purposes of this, maybe it's some kind of certified wood alternative or wood certified composite. Maybe that term is the right term of art. That way a certification could be from any organization that wants to claim, this is the warranty or this is the way that this material is compiled.
That might be a good solution.
Okay,
Yeah.
So to include just after in Part B, allowed materials, fences may be constructed of wood or certified composite alternatives.
Are we considering white vinyl fencing that's not a composite, that's just vinyl? So is that a wood alternative?
Yeah, I'd call that a mimic. It's just what's too bad, and I know that this is it's kind of a terrible reference, but there was a really pretty white fence up the Mackenzie, up 126, that as a result of the fires, it looks like birthday candles. And it's this is
not a burn.
Yeah. And so the materials just don't hold up to a lot of the environmental factors. Perhaps maybe the wood fence wouldn't have either, but I guess we can't protect people from themselves.
Maybe you need to put an asterisk beside the wood alternatives and then do a little footnote as to referencing what it pertains to.
Okay. These are all great suggestions. I will put wood composite alternatives and
Maybe
share
you should
with.
just say wood alternatives.
Yep. So we'll say wood alternatives, and I'll explain this discussion to the city council and let them be the ultimate word on what our allowed materials nomenclature should look like. But I appreciate very much the input. All right, moving on to, let's see. So we've got height, placement, street side yard. That's the biggest sort of curveball in all of this is that if you've got a front door and then you've got a corner lot, so you've got another street that you abut, but it's not your front door, you can either build a 4-foot fence on that side as well, street side, or you can set that fence back 5 feet and build up to 6 feet tall. The idea being that we give pedestrians a bit more space on those street sides that are actually streets street frontages that are side yards for some people.
What the setback is 5 feet from where?
5 feet from the property line.
Okay.
So that could be usually in the public right of way, that's the back of the sidewalk, not the curb side, but the back side of it.
And if there is no sidewalk, if it's like a culvert, then it'd be like the back side of
The drainage
culvert, I
ditch
guess.
usually, yeah. So if
Okay.
you've got a ditch line, so like in your neighborhood, Seth, there are probably some areas that don't have sidewalks, and so it's like you can look at the telephone poles are a good indicator because they're always in the right of way, and you can find out that folks have been using public right of way as all kinds of beautiful gardens and landscaping and all the rest.
Yeah.
So we won't rain on anyone's parade today, or we'll try not to. Let's see, retaining walls. So any retaining walls that are proposed have to be built to building code standards. That's retained from the old fence standards originally. Same thing with earthen berms in lieu of a fence. And that gives some specificity about where heights are measured. And it also describes that if you choose to berm and then put a fence on top of it, we're going to measure from the street side of it, the total height. So you can't build like a 4-foot berm and then put a 4-foot fence on top of it. People are very creative. Let's see, abatement. You've got some, so the rest of this is very prescribed. We've got an abatement procedure that's to help our code enforcement officer keep people civilized. And finally, a section on variances of the process. And you'll notice that the variance process is almost exactly the same as our notice requirements in Section 4 of the Development Code. So basically, we're going to hold people to the same threshold or standard that we had in the Development Code. We're just moving the words over into the Muni Code.
Hey, Maddie.
Yes,
I
sir.
remember last meeting we had that discussion with the height of the front, and I believe Ed was saying something about maybe changing it to a 3-foot.
Good reminder. Thank you. That's in the clear vision area.
Right.
I think the only challenge that I had in implementing that from 4 feet down to 3 feet is that we call out clear vision standards in the development code as 4 feet. So we'd have to make a differentiation in the municipal code as 3 feet. And I wonder, just in light of Commissioner Gunderson's comment, and thank you, Commissioner Gehring, for reminding me, I wonder if we couldn't try to achieve the same visibility requirement within the clear vision area by not just by height, but by the ability to see through a fence. So if someone wanted to create a 4-foot fence in the front because it was a consistent fence height, but then was assured that vision was you could still see through to at least 3 feet in height, meaning like you could put like some lattice or something that's you could see movement through. I'm thinking about like chain link fences you can see through and other kinds of fences, as long as we assure the vision capacity, the height isn't as important or maybe could be compromised on. I see Mr. Gunderson leaving. Maybe he's disappointed in my comment.
Well, I'm kind of agreeing with the need for it to be 3 feet because not all of us drive a 4x4 that's 10 feet up in the air where we can see over the fence. I've taken note in that we've got a Hyundai Elantra, and you cannot see over a 4-foot fence at a corner. Yeah, you may be able to see through it, like you said. Okay, that would be good. But with the cars getting smaller and shorter, and you're sitting lower in the seat, the newer cars aren't going to be able to see over that 4-foot fence.
I see a demonstration. Can't hear you, Ed. Can you unmute you?
You guys don't read lips?
Not yet.
Maybe it's a good
This is
thing.
4 foot, and I'm sitting higher than I would if I was in a wheelchair. So there is no visibility with 4 foot.
Ed, I also brought up, you're probably also sitting at the same level as you would be sitting in a compact car. I have a Hyundai Elantra that I agree that there needs to be, cut that corner fence at 45 degrees or lower it to 3 feet.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly so I can either agree or disagree. We're saying that if it's a corner within that 15-foot setback, that's where we're saying you either have to go down to 3 or you have to put your fence at a 45-degree angle to stay out of that visibility corner.
Right.
Yeah, I support that. I agree entirely.
It shall be 3 feet. 3 feet or 45-degree cut corner. Okay. That will be reflected in some new diagrams so that we make sure that we know how to do that. John will be happy to provide us with some new ones. And are there any other comments, concerns, questions? There we are, Chair.
Alrighty. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Maddie at this time, other than what we've already gone through?
I have a question. It's just a technical one. If considering the revisions that we've talked about but haven't been drafted, could we approve this with conditions, or is this like a situation that we would deny and then come back with like a full rewritten?
Would we approve it as amended?
Exactly, David, and Commissioner Clark, yes. What I would propose is that you can approve with conditions, or you can approve as amended, and then you can authorize the chair to put her signature on the staff report that says we recommend this as amended and show the amendments. So I'll show them in red. In a draft to the council, and then we'll have like a final version that's all correct that gets adopted by the council at their hearing. But great question about process.
All right. Anything else before we move on for Maddie? Any other questions? Okay. Maddie, we don't have anyone watching or anything, do we? Any comments or anything?
No comments, Chair. We had one person watch for about 5 minutes, and I think they found out we were talking about fence standards and decided to enjoy the rest of this lovely day.
Alrighty.
Forgive I don't mean to discredit our work, but there are choices in life.
Some days are more exciting than others, that's for sure.
That's right.
Okay, well, we are going to go ahead and close the hearing, 5:43 p.m., and we shall deliberate. So, I don't know how much deliberating we need to do, but if we need to, do it now, and then we will make a motion if there is no deliberating. Okay, then let's do a motion. Who would like to make a motion? Seth? Okay, let's do it.
I move that the Creswell Planning Commission approve as amended PA-2021-02, relocating the fence code from the Creswell Development Code to the Creswell Municipal Code as described in the findings of facts as amended. Planning Commission authorizes the chair to sign the recommendation of City Council. All those in favor?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you,
Yeah,
David.
sorry.
Okay.
Thanks,
All right. So David seconds, and then all those in favor of this motion. Ed? Okay. All right. That's unanimous. Thank you, everybody, very much for your hard fence work. This is going to make everyone's job a lot easier at the city, I think, and homeowners as well, making sure they're doing the right thing. So, what do we have next? Looks like staff development summary. Maddie, to you.
Thank you, Chair. This will be fairly brief. We've had one application come in for a project on Melton Road, who will be hopefully maybe a next door neighbor or across the street neighbor to Blue Valley Bistro. A request by Al Solonsky and the owners of that property to build a facility for Wise Women Herbals. So you will see that in your docket as soon as they achieve completeness and are ready for noticing. So everyone who's a neighbor to that property, it's right at the corner as Melton turns almost to between Village Drive and the entrance to Bimart, or the entrance to Blue Valley, kind of in that zone on the south side of Melton Road. Otherwise, we had a very positive pre-application meeting with folks that are looking to build a memory care assisted living facility on Emerald Parkway near the vet clinic. So you'll see more material hopefully from them. They have not submitted yet, but they are moving forward quickly and excitedly on that project. And that's an organization that I think is based on the East Coast, Southeast somewhere, North Carolina or South Carolina, I forget. But that's a wonderful, both of those are wonderful news. The Wise Women Project we've been kind of incubating for a number of years. And then the assisted living facility was one of the items that was highlighted in our housing needs analysis as a needed housing type for older adults as they age out of their living situations. So those are quite positive in my opinion.
I have a question about that,
Please.
Maddie.
Yep.
Are there height restrictions in that area at all due to the proximity to the airport?
There are, yeah, Seth, there are, the maximum height is 35 feet. So that they may not be able to have a high rise above their facility to house all their employees. But they may come for lunch. Tell you what. In any event, that's true. They're in the approach for the airport and within a certain distance, so those two things factor in. The primary restriction is the zoning designation, the general commercial zone, but the secondary restriction is the imaginary surface of the airport, and that has to do with kind of a conical shaped. It's hard to explain. It looks like a big football stadium, but it's sort of imaginary. And this is where you're prohibited from building anything tall. And we also, as a city, are obligated to go out and remove vertical hazards like tall trees in those areas. Otherwise, we've got work on Holbrook getting started, hopefully after the 4th of July. We're still moving in some directions to acquire a right-of-way at the old motel facility. We're kind of working through that. The owners of the motel, some of the owners of the motel are also the folks who bought Bald Knob. So we're kind of looking at that as a bigger project. And so there's been a little bit of a course correction in how that acquisition is going. We will have probably, I think we'll see at least a few more applications come in for houses on Owens Way. Some residential permits. We've got at least one in process right now. And I guess the last but certainly not least on sort of the more recent side is that there will be materials coming forward to you regarding RV park standards at your next meeting for the same kind of recommendation process as this legislative amendment you heard tonight. So your role in that, again, will be to review new standards and recommend their continuing on to a second public hearing at the City Council. Both the fence standards and the RV park standards will go before the Council the same night, August 9th, as kind of a package, just as a planning and development code kind of house cleaning effort. Otherwise, the city's putting together a couple grant applications to try to do some work on our water system. We heard that there's funding available for resilience projects related to seismic vulnerability. And so we're looking at ways to move forward on some of the items within our water master plan. Some of our vulnerabilities are related to or similar to the same vulnerabilities that as a result of old materials. So, for example, asphalt concrete, the material that a lot of our water pipes, main transmission line water pipes are made out of, are also susceptible to eroding or degrading over time and become brittle. And so we're looking at ways to kind of cross-pollinate hazard resilience with some of our improvements that we've highlighted as top priority projects. So you might hear or see that cross the docket at some point, hopefully in the near future. And if there's any following of the process, the budget was just approved by City Council on Monday. So we've got a new budget for fiscal year 21-22 ready to roll. And I'm hoping within the next few weeks to have a rough draft of some of our growth boundary amendment study areas. So you'll remember that in the background, I'm spinning on this UGB amendment project, although it might seem that I'm quite busy in the foreground. I'm also doing that in the background. And in fact, we've got a consultant on board. It's a small project, so it doesn't have a whole lot of fanfare, but it'll at least get us set up for understanding what properties outside of our current growth boundary are eligible, and it will also prompt us to address some of the concerns that maybe the state and others have regarding properties inside the current growth boundary that have yet to be developed. That's what I got. Anyone have any questions about those?
All right. Oh, nothing from anyone. Okay, well, let's do it then. Our next meeting is set for Thursday, July 15th, 2021. If you guys have any issues with that day and or time, email Maddie or I or both, or get a hold of us somehow. And other than that, meeting is adjourned. It is 5:53 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, all.
See y'all.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for bearing with me. I appreciate it.